So then the holiday then asked people to give 67 minutes, and this year, 100 minutes. So it was asked of you earlier, and I'm asking myself, how might we spend 100 minutes? What I'd like to do is start out by sharing a few places from South Africa from Wednesday and a bit of giving back and service. So the first one is a school at Redham Schools. My children attended this school. These children made 8,083 sandwiches and was then given to a local church. It happened to be the church where we worshiped, and will be distributed to the materially poor. This next picture is a mosaic of Mandela, and it was made through the Leaf Schools using canned food donations. Creative art and giving, amazing. This is some of the students from the school where I served, Inanda Seminary, as chaplain, and they're doing some gardening and planting. They have to get really creative because they're at boarding school, so they kind of have to give service to the school on that particular day. And then another picture of them creating and painting some colorful frames for mirrors around the school. Madiba continues to really inspire today. Mandela was a freedom fighter, and he spent 27 years in prison. He was released in 1990 and became the very first democratically elected president of South Africa in 1994. In the first democratic election in 1994, Mandela cast his vote at Ohlange Institute. There's a reason that I'm telling you where it happened, and you'll see the thread just now. Ohlange Institute was established by John Dube, who was the first ANC president, who was educated at Oberlin College in Ohio. Why? Because he was supported by our Congregationalist missionaries who were there and sent to Oberlin to be educated. So sadly, after fighting decades of colonialism and apartheid, many South Africans today do not vote because they feel that their vote doesn't make a difference. Many have become very despondent. Does this sound familiar? Don't stop voting. What a contrast from the very first elections and this long line of people waiting to vote for the very first time. And this was pictures like this all over the country. Let's go back to Ohlange for a moment, where Mandela voted for the first time. That school, started by John Dube, is near the former home of Gandhi, where he spent more than 20 years of his life developing his satyagraha. So where Mandela voted at Ohlange is next to Gandhi and is about 5 miles from the school where I was at, Inanda Seminary. So there is this amazing history on this one road of peace and resistance and voting power and justice and liberation and black women being educated in a very small piece of the road. Inanda Seminary still exists today, in large part due to Mandela. He was the one who secured corporate funding to renovate and restore the school in the year 2000, the same year I arrived. And Mandela was present at the handover of the newly renovated school. When it gets closer to my installation, you'll hear more about South Africa. I'm not going to go into detail about that today. Mandela is credited for freeing his people from apartheid and what you may have heard and know or read the book called The Long Walk to Freedom. While he is revered, and for a very good reason that he is revered, This freedom came at great cost. Violence was used to stand against the powers that oppressed the people. And while there was the renowned Truth and Reconciliation Commission, led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu, people today are feeling the effects of not receiving any compensation. There was forgiveness, but there was not compensation for the people. MLK said this: freedom is never voluntarily given by the oppressor, it must be demanded by the oppressed. Many are suffering and desperate for a new leader today, in South Africa and here. And what do they want? I think it's what Isaiah prophesied and what Melanie read for us today. To proclaim good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, proclaim freedom for the captives, and release from darkness for the prisoners. The book of Isaiah warns against rebelling against God, and then predicts that through Assyria and then Babylon, Jerusalem will fall through God's judgment. Also contained in the book of Isaiah is this contrast of judgment to hope. Hope that there will be a new Jerusalem to come through a servant king, where all will be included and all will be welcomed. Isaiah 61 that we read reads a bit like a poem, and it speaks of this hope. But Isaiah seems to be proclaiming the absolute impossible. And when you begin to unpack and think about the poor, both materially and spiritually, the brokenhearted who grieve and have lost their dreams and hope, those imprisoned behind bars, and those who are imprisoned in hearts and minds, this is an impossible calling and task. Isaiah's prophecy also calls us, I think, to something divine, something higher, something greater, something beyond leaders and politics. It's inviting servants to be a light to the nation, to proclaim good news to the poor, to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim freedom for the captives and release from darkness for the prisoners. This is not a temporary fix. That's how we usually solve problems. It's a forever striving towards justice and a promise that we will become oaks of righteousness. And I think sometimes we forget it because we get despondent and discouraged, and we have to just keep persevering because it just seems like it is an endless striving, and that's exactly what Isaiah says it is. So this oaks of righteousness that Isaiah talks about, maybe you even missed it in the reading or weren't listening or didn't know what it was. Sometimes we do that in the Bible when we don't know what it's talking about. Just read the part we understand. I don't know what oaks of righteousness is, but I need to pause here for a moment because I think what I'm hearing and what you're hearing may not be the same thing, and I need to do a little translation. When you hear oak, maybe you're thinking of a tree. That's not what I hear. When I hear oak, I'm reminded of a slang South African term which refers to a person. Urban Dictionary. There it is. I couldn't believe it was in the Urban Dictionary. I just captured that screenshot. An oak is a person, a male or a female. Oak is a dude. It's a she or a he or a we or a they. So, if you put them together, you get a righteous oak. Which sounds like the 90s when people would say, you're totally righteous, or totally awesome, or super cool. And my teenage children today would say, where's Sky? I saw you. You lit. So, somebody who proclaims good news to the poor, binds up the brokenhearted, proclaims this freedom, I think that person definitely is a righteous oak. And you know what else? You never know what you're going to find when you Google something. It's always a surprise. So I decided to search for a definition for righteous oaks. You won't believe what popped up. Silence. He's stunned to silence. Yeah, you don't know what's hit you, do you, with this associates? Yeah, see, it even teaches you how to pronounce righteous and oaks. It's official. Righteous oaks. There's some righteous oaks on that website for sure. In South Africa, I think there's a word that really encapsulates this scripture and living out justice and righteousness. And this is the word, Ubuntu. I am because you are. Your humanity is tied to my humanity. Desmond Tutu said it this way: bringing people together is what I call Ubuntu, which means I am because we are. Far too often, people think of themselves as just individuals, separated from one another, whereas you are connected and what you do affects the whole world. When you do well, it spreads out. It is for the whole of humanity. I am because you are. My humanity is tied to yours and to all of humanity, and you are to each other. What might it look like if we were practicing Ubuntu? How might we live differently, and how would it change and transform us? There's firstly a recognition of others. We might think of it in terms of seeing that divine spirit in everyone, that we are all created by God and in the image of God, or that we are the same to the Creator. There's also a beautiful word that Global Ministry uses, which is our wider church's mission branch for the church, and uses to speak of this humanity. Now, I'm going to need help with some pronouncing. It's not Zulu this time, it's Spanish. So get ready, all you Spanish speakers. I need to hear you when you see the word. It is... It sounds so much better when you say it, and I didn't want to say it because I was not gonna. It's such a beautiful word. And it means walking side by side in mutuality. Mutuality is one of the core values of Global Ministries. And I asked the Latin American Caribbean office executive to say more of what she thinks it means. She says it's our commitment to walking in hope with others in God's mission, to accompany our partners in their dreams, their hopes, their sorrows, and their pains. What I love about mutuality is that you don't have to do something or fix something or donate something. You don't have to tell somebody else what their problem is or what you think that they need. It's presence. And Marianne Williams said, our presence liberates others. We are present, walking alongside mutuality. An example might be with somebody who's grieving. And the entire world shares grief. And what can you do when someone is grieving a death? Nothing, really. You can only accompany them. Your presence is what is called for. I'm suggesting that a righteous oak is someone who understands that their humanity is tied to others, someone who sees the divine in others, and someone who accompanies others in mutuality. Now, to me, that sounds like a lot, and it's heavy, and I know that many of you are doing all of these things already. So for those of you who need a little push and a bit more of a growth challenge, Here it is from Mandela, and I think from Christ as well. Although walking alongside someone is challenging and messy and can be uncomfortable, we mostly draw alongside people who we perceive are in need and that we can help them in some way. And this usually results in feeling good about what we're doing and hopefully bringing a little bit of joy to another person. We also walk beside people that we enjoy being near, and this brings us joys because we like their company and we like the connections we have with them. But now look to Mandela and to the challenge us further, what it means to be a righteous oak. How about accompanying someone you perceive to be your enemy? The person who thinks opposite of you, the person you fight with on social media, the person who's not interested in being civil or mutual, the person or type of person who's coming to mind right now that's making your skin crawl. What did Mandela say? He said, if you want to make peace with your enemy, you have to work with your enemy. Then he becomes your partner. When Jesus came face to face with his enemies, he said, God, forgive them. They know not what they do. Maybe we need to work with our enemies. And the thought of that overwhelms me. I'm not telling you something that I'm doing or think is easy. I think about individuals and communities who are broken and hurting because of hatred. And how do we work with that? Is that even possible? Could we even conceive of it? Well, Mandela did, and Jesus certainly did. Mandela believed that people who learned to hate could be taught to love. No one is born hating another person because the color of his skin or his background or his religion. People must learn to hate, and if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love. For love comes more naturally to the human heart than its opposite. So, back to Isaiah, back to righteous oaks, and being reminded of this. My humanity is tied to yours, Ubuntu. I see the divine in you. I accompany you, you accompany me in the journey, in mutuality. And I got to figure out a way to make peace and work with my enemies. I don't know what any of these four look like for you, or where you are on the journey, or which one is speaking to you now through the Spirit that is of a challenge. Don't do all four. Just pick one for now. And let that be the thing that you're just wrestling with, struggling with for the moment. I'm going to just in a moment, we're going to sing a song. We're going to actually listen to a song, a new song. And as that happens, I just ask that you would trust the Spirit as it speaks to you through the words of the song, through the scripture reading from Isaiah, and be in a real spirit of just meditation and contemplation.